All right, everybody. Welcome to the Redline Narratives Podcast. I'm your host, Engineer Marlon Solomon. Today, we got an exciting one. It's called 58 AM, so 8 years after Martin. We've got an exciting, great episode with Collin Knight and Dart. Before we get into it, if I could ask you to donate a like, a subscribe, share to the channel, it's going to help with youth programming, more Redline Narratives podcast, and a lot of great stuff that we do at the Afrimerican Academy. Welcome, fellas. How y'all doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
No problem. For those who don't know, the great Collin Knight, the great Collin Knight, who is the CEO and founder of the Live Like a Local Tour Boston, here in these streets, teaching the history of Roxbury and many other places. So, hey, welcome to the show. And then Dar Adams, who is the great South Ender, the brother of South End, who has been teaching a lot of this history. He learned from some of the greats, and we're so excited to have him here on the show. So let's get into it. So, guys, what's going on this beautiful Friday in Boston?
A lot, man. Basically, I've been just doing a lot of work with Everyone 250, especially at being the chair of the historical site subcommittee, trying to get certain sites recognized that weren't back when we did the bicentennial in 1976 or when Boston celebrated its 350th anniversary back in 1980. A lot of sites weren't recognized as historically significant enough
Right.
to attract attention from people that visited Boston back in 1976 or when they came to visit Boston for the 350th anniversary in 1980. You had different groups of people going around trying to deem what sites were of historic significance. And the fact is, a lot of the sites that were cultural hubs for Black, Latino, and Asian communities were so new that they weren't even regarded as something that people should visit if they were coming from other parts of the nation in 1976 or 1980. Whereas now, some of them have kind of disappeared and are now considered, cultural landmarks or of cultural significance. So now I have the responsibility to find those sites and give them their, proper respect and archive them for,
Right.
future people to visit.
We appreciate it. It's so important. These sites we can't actually show people. I know when we do the Once Upon a Time in Nubian Square tour, one of the things I always say is that this is a tour that a lot of things we're going to show you don't exist.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. Colin, what's going on with you guys that live like a local tour in Boston?
I think, we're getting ready, for the busy season, and looking forward to the 250th and FIFA World Cup for a million visitors to come to the city of Boston, and not just to shoot out straight to Foxborough or to
Right.
stay in the downtown area, but we're looking for visitors to come and explore the neighborhoods, of color in the Boston area, to experience that food history and culture. And we're, as a company, doing the best we can to bring all of the people together that care about that mission, whether they're local tour operators or directors of museums and cultural institutions, together for the Our Story, Our Narrative committee, that we're building right now over the last couple of months to not only get ready for the 250th, but to get ready for the 400th, and also just to be ready to build the infrastructure so that there is a definitive map of different things that you can do in our communities, which hasn't really been done before, except for my town and Discover Roxbury. But there hasn't been a real infrastructure where a person from that's visiting the city can actually look at a booklet and say, oh my God, here are these tours that we can do, and here are all these cultural institutions that we can visit in the neighborhoods away from the downtown area. We all know the city needs to do a better job of giving us the exposure that we deserve, because our history and our culture means just as much as the European history that's being glorified in the downtown area. And so that's what we've been working on, and we're really just excited to welcome visitors and to show them, what we have to offer, which are great murals, obviously amazing food from different cultures, and in the history, all of the history, right? Not just the European history, but all of the history that exists in this city. People think of the city of Boston as a white city. If you're not from this area, Dart knows what I'm talking about. But what they don't realize is that we're a multicultural city of all types of immigrants from everywhere that have been coming to this city and making it their home. And I think that that the rest of the world and the rest of the country need to know that about us. And a big shout out to Roxbury and all of their history that they have to offer as well. So.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm excited about Boston 250 and what the Afrimerican Academy is going to bring to the table. We've got the youth that we've just started hiring, getting them all trained up is the next thing on the ticket. So we're excited. We develop a lot of curriculum. I'm really excited about 58 AM, which is 58 years after Martin. It is, in our regard, the way we look at it is that this is when democracy started for us as African Americans in this country. So if you look at it like that, 58 years, to be honest, we're younger than Nigeria. and that is, I think that's important, to really recognize, okay, when could we vote? When were we recognized as human beings? But even more importantly, because everything is based in space, we don't get these rights. We don't live as human beings in just air. We consume space, and without spatial justice, can you really be truly recognized as a human being? So April 4th is coming up. That's when the good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And then 7 days later, the Fair Housing Act, which was stalled in Congress. Imagine that. Congress was ineffective back then for us back then as well. And it was stalled in Congress for something like 2 years or so. And his death, spilling of his blood, created riots all across the United States, which was commonly known as Holy Week Uprising because it was about to be Easter. And 7 days later, LBJ, president, signed it into law. And from that moment on, redlining, urban rural, spatial, and all the spatial injustice was technically, only technically eliminated. And why do I say technically? Infrastructure law has a little bit of is different from all kinds of other law, because this infrastructure law gets turned into actual brick and mortar and stone and roads and bridges and highways. And once those laws are being put into concrete, they literally stay like that until the concrete is done. I always mention the North End and how the North End reflects 18th century and 19th century building codes. And it doesn't matter what year it is. So far, those streets are built and the little windy little roads are there. That whatever the engineer at that time thought of is in effect. So we're very excited to have it. I'm going to be at the historic Wally's Jazz Cafe, the only family-owned facility, restaurant, and bar that has been around since 1947. So we're very excited to go there and join Miss Eleanor and Frank. What y'all looking forward to for Saturday? Well, for the 11th.
Well, when I think about what happened the week after Martin Luther King Jr. passed away, was assassinated or murdered, I think about 1, the Fair Housing Act, 2, the Tent City protests that happened when Mel King and his group took over space that was in an unused parcel of land that the community had fought and fought and fought and fought and fought about, and said, why aren't we using this for housing? Why aren't we using this for housing? So they decided we're just going to occupy this land. And
Hmm.
that's when Tent City was made. The police came, tried to break it up a couple times, but they stood their ground. And eventually, what happened is that parcel was designated to have housing built on it. Now, of course, progress is extremely slow. So it took 20 years for
Hmm.
Tent City to exist. Now, what's crazier is what's expedited Tent City's building is they already underwent the Southwest Corridor Mall Park situation in accordance with the Orange Line, the new Orange Line, which was going to raise the old elevated Orange Line and move it underground and kind of move the way the Orange Line went through a different route. So it no
Right, to
longer
Back
went
Bay.
through, back to Back Bay. It no longer went through what was then Dudley Square.
Right.
So all these things happen, and then the third piece is April 11th, 1968. Um, a school that was a junior high in Roxbury changes its name to the Martin Luther King Junior High.
Really?
Junior high. And that is something that I believe Boston was the first city to have a school named after Martin Luther King Jr. in the entire
Wow.
nation. So those are the three things I think about that happened within the week of the passing of Martin Luther King Jr. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that Boston considered Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King as honorary Bostonians. They had a lot of friends and they had a
Right.
lot of people that they worked with in the community that regarded them, and they remained friends throughout throughout Coretta and the King family's life. They've been coming back here ever since. They have feel a fondness and affinity for Boston that people who don't know anything about the city they just don't understand. So they don't understand why the Embrace statue or the Embrace Monument even exists here.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Collin,
I think it's
what's
no. You know, he's right about all of that, and you know, for me, it's mind-boggling that people don't realize, you know, the King's legacy here in the Boston area, in Roxbury to be specific. All people know is that he went to divinity school at BU, but they have no idea that, you know, he spent most of his time in Roxbury, and that, you know, this is where he hung out. This is where he went to Slade's and where he played cards with friends, where he hung out and wore a do-rag like I'm wearing right now, you know, to keep his hair tight, right? So I think it's important for people, as we celebrate the legacy of Dr. King, is also to make sure that we humanize him, to understand that he was a man just like all of us, that he had flaws, but that didn't take away from his mission in making the earth a better place, for lack of a better term. So just love all of the elements of the man that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was, right?
right.
He played pool, and was a good pool player, you know, and used playing pool as a way to connect with the community, right? So this man had a lot of
The
different
Reverend was hustling
skills.
people on the pool.
Oh man, you
Oh,
know,
he was a hustler. He hustled
he
people
was a
too.
real hustler. I heard there was a great story about him in Chicago where he wanted young people to come out. And you know, the young people was like, "Nah, I'm cool. I don't know who he is." And he went
Right.
into the neighborhood in the South Side and went into the pool hall and said, "Hey, if I win this game, y'all gonna come out and support me." And he mopped the table with all of them, and they came, and they had to go and support him. And those types
Right.
of things, for me, really shows his greatness. You know.
Right.
As an activist, right, is that he could connect with his community no matter where he was, and was able to use his skills to do that. And so he's a great man for so many different reasons. And I think, like I said, the rest of the world and the country don't realize how significant Boston and Roxbury specifically are to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's life, and also Coretta Scott. So King. So it's really important that people kind of recognize that history. And I know that we'll touch on it on the 11th, but I think that that's the biggest misconception about Boston,
Right.
is that they don't realize how connected the Kings actually were and that they fell in love and met here. Like
Mhm.
those are
Right.
things that people just don't understand or know about it, and why it's so important that you and I, Marlon, are doing tours of the community and speaking to that.
Right. I'm so glad you brought that up because one of the things about history is that history didn't, like I said, it doesn't happen in just air. It happened in certain locations. And I
Mhm.
think it's extremely important that one of the reasons why people may even not put so much reverence into the fact that Reverend was in our community, because we don't have a big significant marker in our community. We do have the love story mural, which I do think location based is the most culturally appropriate place to put a marker. But I do think that, like one of my opinions is that, like, if, like, I think the Embrace statue in the comment is perfect for that statue, that design, it's perfect for that location. But if we were going to mark, because the real love story happened right there on the corner of Shaman and Melanie, a former site of 12th Baptist Church. So I think that I would have loved to see a big statue of him in his full glory, probably with because of the significance to the location to the church, um, um, with a reverend's robe, or his Bible, and maybe with Coretta and his family behind him, because in the end of the day, that's the story we're trying to inspire in our people, that his faith was very key. Because I always say the civil rights movement wasn't a civil movement; it was a religious movement,
Mhm.
um, and that having the characterization that is in the common, which is about his civil rights career, which is about him getting the Nobel Peace Prize, which, if we all understand that, even calling him doctor, these are all terms that were given to him by outside communities, right? By Boston University, by the Switzerland, the Nobel Peace Prize. But in our community, his title was Reverend. In our community, he was a man of cloth. He was a family man. And these are the kind of things that I feel that we would like to inspire in our youth. And a big statue of him at that location, I think, is Reverend. What do you guys think of something along those lines?
So, to piggyback what Colin was saying, one of the reasons why I'm sitting here today is because I had a unique perspective being a little kid in the South End, Lower Roxbury, where I had people from the community, elders, come and tell me stories about
Mm.
Martin Luther King Jr. being a pool hustler, playing basketball, going to the jazz club, playing cards, telling stories about him as a student in somebody else's kitchen, after church from the 12th Street Baptist Church. And they're like, I can't even take off my church clothes because Martin in here. So, like, so these are stories I'm hearing about him, about hanging out at Sharaf's Cafe, a cafeteria, and meeting Coretta. Like, there was a guy in my neighborhood who used to talk trash about Martin Luther King Jr. because in his mind he stole his woman Coretta, because he
Uh
was
oh.
trying to talk to
Uh
Coretta.
oh.
He was trying to talk to Coretta, but he went around it. He went about things in a Southern gentleman manner. He asked, "Do you know any young women who I can date?" And there's like, I'll come up with a list. And he courted her through, friends and people in the community, because she was here from the South, at at the
Really conservatory.
conservatory, studying piano and voice. Now, the other piece is that I knew about him as, the basketball player, the hustler, the pool, the person, but also the idea of him being the drum major for peace, the great orator, you know,
Mm.
um, being a man of the cloth, all of these things weren't, he was humanized, but also this is all encompassing one person, and this is all different aspects of him as a person. So I feel that oftentimes we take the person and turn them into an ideal, an entity, and
Right.
not a whole person. But growing up in Boston, I got to know about the whole person and also understanding how he met Coretta. So the idea, the love story Coretta, people were telling me when Coretta heard his voice on the phone, she thought he was taller than he was. And then when they met, yeah, and then and then when they met, she was like, "Oh, he's shorter than I thought," and he had to grow on her. But he told his parents, "Oh, I found my future wife." And then the other piece of it is you're absolutely right. Space and where markers are matter because they notify certain things. I was one of the people that would do tours for a long time, and I would bring people to where Lincoln Apartments used to be and say,
Mm.
this is where when Martin and Coretta got married down south, they came back home and lived in the Lincoln Apartments. And it was convenient because Lincoln Apartments were near Slade's, they were near Bob the Chef's, but also it was directly across the street from his favorite basketball court at Carter Playground.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And also he was around his community. They lived in Boston for a while before they got up and left and went back to the South. So
Mm-hmm.
not understanding these things takes all the context out of why is
Right.
Boston hold on to Martin and Coretta the way they do, because they were part of our community. They were
Right.
honorary Bostonians. They were friends with Mel King. They were friends with the Alan Rohan Craig. They were in community with all these civil rights leaders and advocates for the
Reverend
community.
Michael Haynes.
Mm-hmm.
Reverend Michael Haynes. So
Right.
they made lifelong friends. That's why he came back here so much. And
Right.
I think that's a big piece too. But also when you have markers and you have to do these things so that it makes it plain, not just to the community, because sometimes generations pass and people forget because not everyone's
Yes.
told these stories. But also, it makes it
Right.
plain to not just the city, the state, the nation, the world, that this person was of significance, this community is of significance. And
Right.
why? Because when you see a statue or you see a monument, you see a marker, you stop and you start asking questions.
Right.
Otherwise, it's the same thing that's been happening for the past few decades and generations. People just walk by that space not knowing that it has any significance. And why is that important?
Significance.
Why is that important? Because I talk to young people, you talk to young people, Collin talks to young people, and when we share this history with them, it changes their perspective. It changes their outlook. Because
100%.
I've had kids come up to me and say, I never really felt connected to my community or my city because I didn't think I was important in the big, in the large spectrum of everything else. But now I realize I'm part of a continuum, I'm part of the history, I'm part of a cycle. What I'm doing isn't new. I'm part of the thread in the fabric of the city of Boston.
Right.
Yeah,
And I
I
think that's
love.
why it's important.
Yeah, Don, I think you're exactly right. I think it's so important, especially the work that Marlon's doing when he's working with these young people in the summers to do these tours to kind of preserve these cultural hub spaces, so that they do get the feeling that you just described, right? And I think
Right.
it's up to the doers, right, to make this happen. And I'm going to be on this platform and keep it honest. We need some funding to keep this going, to keep this legacy going of us as local historians continuing to push, that history, onto the next generation. I think that that's what this
Right.
is really about.
Right.
And also, just to piggyback on Dodd's comments, just about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and his time here in the city of Boston, and how it's not documented in the way that it should. I feel personally like his time in Boston should be documented just as much, or if not more, than his time in Atlanta. He became a man in the city of Boston.
Mm.
He became an
Good
associate
point.
pastor in the city of Boston. Met his wife in
Very
the
good
city
point.
of Boston, right? And
Right.
so, how is it that in Atlanta, his house is a museum, and there are all these tributes to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King? Yes, that
Right.
is his birthplace. But where he actually became a man is here in the city of Boston, and specifically in the neighborhood of Roxbury, right? And so,
Yes.
I feel like just as much as the history is there in Atlanta, it should be here in Boston, Massachusetts as well. And so,
Yeah.
as a city and a state, we need to really take a look at that, and make sure that we fund and market so that we can put markers, so that we can make sure that that history is told. And I think a lot of the African American people that across the country and across the world don't realize that about the city of
Right.
Boston. And I think it needs to be known. It needs to be on a bigger scale.
Right.
Excuse me, because when I'm
That's
looking
good.
at Meet Boston's their
Itinerary.
marketing and their
Right.
commercials, none of it really speaks to Black Boston at all. It glazes over certain neighborhoods, but it doesn't speak to Black Boston at all. And that's really to say, hey, everybody stay downtown. That's what the marketing, if you've ever seen a Meet Boston commercial, that's what that is.
No, I hear what you're saying.
So for me, it's really important that we continue to do the work that we're doing to highlight Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy and other activists, obviously such as Malcolm X, who also became a man here in the Roxbury area,
in Boston.
Right. So just
want
to
one thing I'm hearing, because I talk a lot about cultural hubs. Cultural hub is just a fancy word. It's really like a village, and some of this cultural erasure that has affected us as a people, as African Americans, is the fact that the connection to the land, like a village, like a tribal village, that thing. That's whenever I hear Roxburyans talk about Roxbury, like before the urban renewal, that's what I hear. I hear about theaters, I hear about churches, I hear about Carter Playground, I hear about this community, this village, and it literally is probably the closest we got back to getting to those kind of ancestral homelands. And when you now don't have the markers, what I think when you zoom out and look at all the markers that we have, right, it clearly shows that Roxbury's and South End are our cultural homelands, right? Like you put all the markers, all our great heroes are from there, lived there, worked there. The story of Malcolm X working at Wally's, or getting arrested in Dudley Station, like all these things, Alan Rohan Kreit's work, So once you now look down and let's say you could have a pin and put them down on a map, right? You would see a collection of evidence, of data points that show that area is our cultural homeland and needs to be recognized as such.
Yeah,
and that's why the urban renewal was so devastating to me. Why I talk about it so much is because all our gains that we had post-slavery collected in this place, the creation of jazz, the Chitlin Circuit, the Negro League games that were played, was it Dorchester Eagles, all of it. Let's look at it as a whole. It means a whole lot, and that's what the erasure has done. That's why our young people don't feel connected to the land. They don't feel. So if you're not connected to the land, would you fight for the land, right? Are you going to stand up for the land? Another aberration. I think we should do another event in November around Mandela Town, right? That was another cultural, how would you say, outreach, a cultural, a day of cultural significance, where we tried to literally codify into law our cultural homeland. And so I'm just so excited that we are going to continue all this work moving forward. I wouldn't want to do it with any. I think maybe I could add Joel McCall, shout out to Joel, to this mixture of having Black men step up to the plate and do what needs to be done. I do know that this is the longest we've advocated our education of our young people to anybody else. There were 7 schools. I'm sure you can do the Sterling School, Asa Gray. We don't want to give too much out because we still got the 11th to go.
Yeah, no, definitely. But let me just,
Marlon,
let me just throw out there too. And you make a good point when we're talking about this urban renewal and kind of how it washed away our cultural hub spaces, which is the reason why our young people don't know about or care about our history, right? And I will say too, when we're thinking about the systematic oppression that exists in our communities, not just in Boston but across the country, there are young men that are claiming these blocks, but they're not doing it in a way that we need them to, right? Mm-hmm. They're claiming those blocks in a negative way where it causes negativity and causes harm to each other. Right. So what we want to do with this movement is for them to claim those blocks with pride and claim those blocks with knowing their history and what happened on these blocks and being able to pass that history on to the next generation. That's one thing. And the other thing is, as you talk about these cultural hub spaces and the idea of urban renewal, and we both know, all 3 of us know that that's not a new thing, right? You guys have taught me about New Guinea in the North End and about Beacon Hill, and how those were our spaces at one point, right? And so, yes, Marlon's right. The South End, Roxbury, it's all Roxbury. That's a whole nother conversation that we can have. That I know
Oh,
Marlon.
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
be here.
I saw
We'll
that
be
clip
here
you did,
forever.
Dart. I
Yeah.
saw that
So,
clip you did. Yep.
but just to speak on that, it's like that. Our cultural hub spaces have moved around because we've been pushed, to different places, and so
Right.
um, right now, what does this
And
look
it's still
like for us?
happening.
And it's still happening, and that's what I was getting to. Is like, well, what do we do now to reclaim those cultural hub spaces, and to make sure the next generation is going to carry and carry that baton? That's our
Right.
job right now. The three of us, and there's some others that really do care about this work. That's really our job. That's why Dart is, going to the First Church of Roxbury to meet with me and RYP, right? That's why you are going to RYP to speak to the students. Like
Right.
we're locking each other in to make sure that
Roxbury Youth Program.
Roxbury Youth Program at the Urban Ministry, right? Like we're showing up at these places to talk with these young people, and you guys are making guest appearances, not for money, because there ain't none of it out there for us, right?
Yeah.
And it's not about that. It's about making sure that our young people understand how important our history is. And I
I'm
can't
going to
think
push back
enough.
about the money, though, because if we don't
Okay.
have money to fund our history, it dies. Like we're in a capitalistic
No,
society.
I
Like
just meant in the
you know.
sense.
No, I know.
Yeah, just in the sense of us doing it because we care
You
about
taught me
our young
that.
people. Yeah, just because we care about our young people. Yes, we do need money. And I did reference that in the beginning of our conversation, that funding is very important for us to
Right.
continue
Like
the work that we do.
let's
Yeah,
keep it real. Like
but it
we
won't,
need money.
but the money won't, or
I
lack
know.
thereof, won't stop us from still
We
continuing
didn't
to visit
start
our
this
young
because of
people.
money. Is what you're
That's
saying.
right.
It's a passion. It's a
That's
cultural
right.
position. It's
That's
like
right.
a cultural calling, like being a reverend, being a historian. When they erase the history, they also erase the historian. Let's hit.
Exactly.
Let's Dart. Was it? You want to come in on this?
Yeah. So the important thing about history and how I got started in it and how I became so obsessed with it is because it's around storytelling and belonging. Because if you don't see yourself in the picture,
Mhm.
how do you feel that you're important? How do you feel that you should be catered to? How it affects how you feel you should be treated, right?
Right.
Because if you're not centered ever, if you're not seen, oh, then I don't matter.
Yep.
So when you think about history and you think, wait, people that look like me, who lived here before me, did X, Y, Z that was important to not just people who live here, but people all across the nation. And some of these people became worldwide famous. And they're from my community, they're from my city, they're from my town. And people that live in my neighborhood now knew them because the beauty of Boston is, as I always say, it's the size of Shaq's left shoe. So there's not 6 degrees of separation. It's like 1.5 to 2, 3 at the
Right.
most.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you realize that in terms of history, that means that in Boston and Massachusetts, things are intertwined because everybody's somebody's cousin or play cousin, or I went to school with them, or I went to church with them, or they're a friend of my family member. So you get
Right.
all the stories and you get all these lessons, and people tell you things about somebody, and you don't know if it's true or not. But when you do research, which is what leads to the research piece, you realize, oh my gosh, all these stories I was told as a kid about my neighborhood, about my community, about these people who achieve things here happened. So when you're going through the old books about like knowledge about black achievers, it's like, what was the first publication that catered to black folks? Wait a second, it was made in my neighborhood. Between 1900 and 1904, and it inspired people who were prominent in the Harlem Renaissance. The father of the Harlem Renaissance was in this city, going back and forth between here and Cambridge before he came up with his pieces praising Harlem and then doing the salons and everything in the Harlem Renaissance. But he was here first. And then you think about like the Crisis. The Crisis is the brainchild of W.B. Du Bois, who also was involved and a fan of this same publication in Boston. And who are all the people that were involved? There was a black woman in charge that was the editor. Now, when you go through all these things, you start getting these names. and all these names, like all these people were in Boston, all these people were in this neighborhood, all these people came through Beacon Hill, they were in the West End, they were in they had family, you know, in the North End that got pushed out into the West End, and it got pushed into the South End, and then Lower Roxbury, and then Roxbury. And I'm just like, you lose all sense of self without knowing your history.
Right.
And you gain all types of self-esteem, and you want to speak up for yourself. You want to share what you learned when you know history and you know your history, especially because you want to highlight the parts about your history that were kept from you, and you don't want anybody
Hmm.
else to be in the dark.
Right.
So for me, all of it ties in together, and that's why I do this work, because I didn't want to have more generations of black and brown Bostonian kids feel completely disconnected from their city because of a lack of information. When the city is everything is documented in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the history of Massachusetts Bay Colonies, and we are right near Copley Square Library.
Right.
We are right near all the biggest archives and all the oldest archives. And I got to tell you, Marlon, as you well know, this Commonwealth and this area is so documented that you can find the earliest record of the people who arrived here, the births, where they're buried, everything.
Right.
So it's all
Right.
out there.
Right. Except for in certain places, I told you that one place,
Yes.
the South End historical society.
Yeah. Oh, the South
Let's
End.
not start there. Let's not start there. We got only a few minutes left.
So, but just an aside about the South End Historical Society. The only one thing that I did get from them that was of any significance, there's a street survey from 1972 that was published in 1973 that
Right.
shows the entire South End and what the streets look like, what the businesses were like, what the people look like hanging out front between 1972 and 1973. And that
Right.
was a revelation for me. And I was looking at it early before I got on here.
Right. And I told you that the reason why everything starts in 1972, because that's when the law was passed that they should
Yes.
not destroy any more
Conservation Act.
buildings or historical
That's
things.
right.
But then by that time, they had already wiped out everything that
Yes.
really,
Mostly.
meant
That's right.
anything to us. So I know that we have to go soon, so I just wanted to give everyone to go around. I know we want to plug our event and we got going. I'm really excited to have you guys join us. So if people don't know, we're doing it kind of like a fundraiser. There's a raffle involved where you can get a free walking tour. Once upon a time, in Nubian Square walking tour. I'm not going to guarantee that everybody on this call right now will be there, but we will. I will be there.
We're
We'll
campaigning.
get
We're
there.
still
Hey,
campaigning.
gotta get sued, bro. So, but yeah, and it's so everything is on the Eventbrite. So we'll give everybody an opportunity to close up, but we look forward to seeing you for Holy Week Uprising, our Easter programming for 58 years after Martin. Yeah, guys, close us out, and we'll call it a night.
Looking forward to this event, 58 after Martin, 58 a.m. It marks a whole bunch of things of importance for Boston, our community, and the struggle and the progress that we started making going forward. And I'm just looking forward to seeing all of you in Wally's.
Yeah,
Right.
I echo that, and we didn't get to do it last year, Marlon. So I'm really happy that we're going to get to do it this year, and it just speaks to the dedication that you have to make sure that your ideas come to fruition, my brother. So I'm excited for this, and I'm really hoping that the community comes out. These are three men who really care about this work, care about this history. And I think it will behoove the community to come out and just hear us kind of talk about it and share ideas and share history, because we don't know everything. There'll probably be some elders in the audience that will be able to give us some things that we didn't know. So which is why it's important for us to have this kind of intergenerational gathering, right? So that we can share ideas with each other and get a chance to connect. So I'm really excited about it, and I can't wait.
No, thank you so much. And like I said, let's give a shout out to everyone, 250 and Reveal, for making sure that a lot of the work we've been doing has been getting amplified. So really appreciate them. And, I know you say it's my idea, but I just like Collin and and Dart know that we research. And I found this a culturally significant piece of our history that needs more amplifying. See, the erasure is about building up our history. And yes, we're not going to get it all, but some things we talk about his birth, right? And, when he's born and that's great. But Easter is a time of reflection. And I just felt that it kept on calling to me that I want everybody to know that I'm sorry, America. Yes, we're celebrating 250 years of America, but we're not celebrating 250 years of democracy. We're celebrating about 58 years of democracy. Because if we couldn't vote, then nobody was free. Like, what's that saying? If one person is free to vote, we were not recognized as human beings. And then we did not have spatial justice. And we put all the three civil rights acts together. And that period between 1964 and 1968, that's a period that we really need to reflect on because, in all honesty, that's what's happening now. That the
Mhm.
people
You
that
see,
lost that battle are
don't
trying
get us
to win
started.
it back.
You're gonna have this podcast last a little bit too long because now you're gonna open up that can of worms.
No. That's why I'm
It's
stopping
being
it
rolled
now.
back. Everything that we've been talking about, now they're trying to roll it
Right,
back.
but I want I want people to know that there is a program now going on in Boston. You say, why does this matter to you now? It matters because they're displacing people right now. They have the data that says that these are the places that are going to have the highest displacement, and they are still going to develop those places. And if they develop those places and increase the property values of those places in the places that have the highest level of displacement, that is literally going to happen. And every 60 years, and I thank Dark for this, and I've thanked him more than once, but I want to thank him again for linking the New Guinea settlement. Once I got that piece, it was clear to me that every 60 years or so in Boston, African Americans are displaced in mass. Then they go to the West End, they get displaced in 1900s, 1910s. Then in 1960s, they get displaced again. And you cannot have intergenerational wealth without intergenerational stability. So and we're now getting more pushed to Sharon, we're getting pushed to Brockton, and Braintree, we're getting pushed southward. That's the Boston Trail of Tears, y'all. So we have to start talking and claiming our cultural spaces, making sure our cultural spaces are fulfilling their need, which is education. But remember, Boston is filled with buildings that make money based on its history. So we have to get that money too. If we don't get that money, we can't get the stability. What, are we supposed to make money just from our jobs? No, there's money from history. There's money from tourism. There's money from selling our cultural artifacts, our soul food, our music, all these other stuff. And without these spaces and to call home, then we can't be whole. So we want to invite everyone out, and thank you so much for watching this podcast. But come out to Wally's Jazz Cafe Saturday, April 11th at 1 p.m. We'll see you all there. And bring a friend. Thank you. Stay blessed.
All right, brothers.
All right.